The crash. The explosion tore through space like an angry god's fist. Captain Marcus Kane watched helplessly as his ship, the UES Defiance, broke apart around him. Metal screamed and twisted as alien plasma cannons ripped through the hull. The bridge erupted in sparks and smoke, throwing him against the command console with bone-crushing force. "All hands, abandon ship!" Marcus shouted into his comm, but static answered back. The communication array was gone, vaporized along with half the crew quarters. Through the shattered viewport, he could see escape pods launching like scattered seeds, some making it to safety, others caught in the crossfire of the alien fleet. The Zarathi had come without warning. Their massive ships, black as midnight and twice the size of Earth's finest vessels, had dropped out of hyperspace near the mining colony of Kepler-7. Marcus and his crew had been patrolling the outer rim when the distress call came through. By the time they arrived, the colony was already burning. Now his ship was dying too. The gravity generator failed with a grinding shriek, and Marcus found himself floating in 0G as emergency lights bathed everything in hellish red. His leg was broken. He could feel it, and something warm was trickling down his face. Blood, probably. The taste of copper filled his mouth as he struggled to reach the emergency beacon. The Defiance lurched suddenly, caught in the gravity well of the nearby planet. Arcturus Prime was supposed to be uninhabitable, a frozen wasteland of ice and rock, but it was better than dying in the void. Marcus strapped himself into the emergency crash seat and held on as his ship became a meteor. The impact was everything he expected, and worse. The world exploded into pain and darkness, metal screaming against stone as the Defiance carved a burning trench across the planet's surface. When the noise finally stopped, Marcus hung upside down in his harness, bleeding and barely conscious. Snow was falling through the holes in the hull, each flake hissing as it touched the superheated metal. The cold bit at his exposed skin like hungry teeth. He fumbled with the harness release, his fingers numb and clumsy. When he finally dropped free, he hit the tilted deck hard enough to see stars. The ship's computer was dead, its screens black and lifeless. The reactor had shut down, automatically, which meant no heat, no power, and no way to call for help. Marcus crawled through the wreckage, looking for supplies, for anything that might keep him alive long enough for rescue. That's when he found the stasis pod in the cargo bay. It hadn't been on the manifest. Hell, Marcus would have remembered authorizing the transport of anything that looked like a high-tech coffin. The pod was sleek and silver, covered in symbols he didn't recognize. Some kind of alien writing, maybe, or something older. The status display showed green lights across the board, indicating the occupant was alive and stable. Marcus stared at the readout, his breath forming clouds in the freezing air. Whatever was inside had been sleeping for a long time. The date stamp showed it had been in stasis for over 3 years. 3 years without maintenance, without power from a ship's reactor, and yet it was still running. He was about to turn away when the pod began to open. Steam hissed from the seals as the lid rose with mechanical precision. Inside, floating in, a cocoon of preservation gel, was a woman. She looked human at first glance, but there were differences. Her skin was too pale like moonlight on snow, and her hair was silver white despite her youthful appearance. When her eyes opened, they glowed with an inner fire that made Marcus step back instinctively. She rose from the pod gracefully, the gel sliding off her like water. She wore some kind of form-fitting suit that looked more advanced than anything. Earth's military possessed. When she spoke, her voice carried an accent he couldn't place. "Where am I?" she asked, her glowing eyes focusing on Marcus with laser intensity. "Arcturus Prime," he managed, surprised his voice still worked. "My ship crashed. You were in the cargo bay. I don't know how or why." She looked around at the wreckage, taking in the twisted metal and falling snow with professional calm. "The Defiance," she said, reading the ship's name from a twisted bulkhead. "I remember now. I made a deal with your Admiral Peterson. Safe passage in exchange for information about the Zarathi fleet movements. Marcus blinked. You're an intelligence asset? She smiled and he caught a glimpse of fangs. Something like that. My name is Zara Nightwind, and judging by the wreckage and the Zarathi burn patterns on your hull, we're both in considerable unlikely alliance. The temperature inside the crashed ship dropped steadily as Arcturus Prime's bitter night approached. Marcus worked frantically to seal the hull breaches with emergency patches while Zara moved through the wreckage with inhuman grace, salvaging what she could from the ship's systems. Your heating unit is completely destroyed, she reported, her breath not forming clouds, despite the cold. But I can jury-rig something from the backup life support. It won't be comfortable, but it should keep you from freezing. Marcus looked up from where he was trying to splint his broken leg with pieces of conduit. What about you? Don't you need heat? Zara paused in her work, her strange eyes meeting his. I run cold anyway. It's part of what I am. And what exactly are you? Marcus asked, wrapping his leg as best he could. The pain was getting worse, but he pushed through it. Because last I checked, humans don't have glowing eyes or fangs. I'm Sanguirian, she said matter-of-factly, as if that explained everything. We're what your people might call space vampires, though the comparison isn't entirely accurate. We don't turn into bats. We don't fear crosses, and we can function quite well in sunlight. But we do require blood to survive, and we're considerably harder to kill than baseline humans. Marcus stared at her. Space vampires, of course. Why not? This day just keeps getting better. Zara's expression softened slightly. I understand your skepticism. My people have been watching Earth for decades, but we've kept our distance. Too many bad experiences with first contact scenarios usually ends with one species trying to exterminate the other. So what changed? Marcus asked, finally getting his makeshift splint secured. Why work with human intelligence? The Zarathi, Zara said grimly. They're not just expanding their territory, they're harvesting genetic material from conquered species, trying to create the perfect soldier. My people were one of their early targets. We've been fighting them for over 50 years. She activated a small device from her suit, and holographic displays sprang to life around them. Star charts, fleet movements, tactical analyses. Marcus had never seen intelligence data so detailed. Your Admiral Peterson contacted us through back channels, Zara continued. We agreed to share information about Zarathi tactics and technology in exchange for safe haven in human space. I was supposed to brief your fleet commanders at Kepler Station. Yeah, well, Kepler Station is gone, Marcus said bitterly. The Zarathi hit it first, probably used your intelligence to plan the attack. Zara's eyes flashed dangerously. Impossible. The data I carry is encrypted with biolocks. Only I can access it, and only with the proper authorization codes from both our governments. A new sound interrupted their conversation, the distant whine of engines approaching through the storm. Marcus and Zara both froze, listening intently. Zarathi scout ships, Zara whispered. They're doing search patterns, looking for survivors. Marcus felt his heart sink. How long do we have? Minutes, maybe less. Zara was already moving, gathering, supplies with mechanical efficiency. There's a cave system about 2 kilometers north of here. I spotted it during my scan of the crash site. If we can reach it before they find the ship, we might have a chance. I can barely walk, Marcus protested, gesturing to his injured leg. Then I'll carry you. Before he could object, Zara scooped him up in her arms like he weighed nothing. Her strength was incredible, far beyond what her slender frame suggested. Hold on to these, she said, handing him a pack of salvaged supplies. They left the dying ship behind, plunging into the howling storm. Zara moved through the snow like a ghost, her feet barely leaving prints despite carrying Marcus's full weight. Behind them, The whine of engines grew louder. The first energy beam struck just as they reached the cave entrance. The blast turned a nearby boulder into glowing slag, the heat washing over them even through the storm. Zara dove into the cave mouth, rolling to absorb the impact and somehow managing not to crush Marcus in the process. More beams lanced through the air where they'd been standing. The Zarathi had found the crash site. How did they track us so fast? Marcus gasped as they crawled deeper into the cave. Biosensors, Zara replied grimly. They can detect life signs from orbit. Your ship's reactor signature probably masked us initially, but once the core went completely cold, they pressed deeper into the cave system, following narrow passages that twisted and branched like veins through the rock. Behind them, they could hear the harsh voices of Zarathi ground troops beginning their search. There, Zara whispered, pointing to a side passage barely wide enough for one person. We can hide there until they pass. They squeezed into the narrow space, pressed together in the darkness. Marcus could feel Zara's unnatural coolness through their clothes, could hear her breathing despite not needing to breathe like a human. Her eyes glowed softly in the dark, providing just enough light to see by. "Why did you really help me?" Marcus asked quietly. "You could have just left me in the ship and disappeared." Zara was silent for a long moment. "Because leaving people behind isn't what allies do," she finally said. "And like it or not, we're allies now. My people and yours, we're fighting the same war." The sound of Zarathi voices echoed through the cave system, growing closer. The hunt begins. The Zarathi search teams were thorough and methodical, their harsh, alien voices echoing through the cave system like the growls of hunting predators. Marcus pressed himself against the cold stone wall, trying to make himself as small as possible in their hiding spot. Beside him, Zara had gone completely still, her breathing so shallow it was barely detectable. Through the narrow gap in the rocks, Marcus could see the flicker of energy torches as the alien soldiers explored the main passage. The Zarathi were tall and imposing, their exoskeletons gleaming black in the artificial light. They moved with the confidence of apex predators, their multifaceted eyes scanning every shadow. One of them stopped directly in front of their hiding place. Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs as the creature's insectoid head tilted, listening. Its mandibles clicked together in what might have been communication or just idle threat display. The alien took a step closer, and Marcus could smell its scent. Ozone and metal and something organic that made his stomach turn. Then Zara moved. It happened so fast, Marcus almost missed it. One moment the Zarathi was examining their hiding spot. The next, it was on the ground with Zara's hand clamped over its breathing vents. She held it there until its struggles ceased, then carefully lowered the body to the cave floor. "We need to move," she whispered. "When this one doesn't report in, they'll know we're here." They waited until the other search teams had moved deeper into the cave system, then emerged from their hiding place. The dead Zarathi lay crumpled against the stone, its weapons scattered nearby. Zara picked up the energy rifle, examining it with professional interest. "These are newer models," she observed. "More advanced than what they were using against my people last year. They're adapting faster than we anticipated." Marcus looked down at the fallen alien. "How long before they realize it's missing?" "Not long. Zarathi operate in neural networks. When one unit goes silent, the others investigate." Zara slung the rifle across her back. "We need to reach the surface and find a way off this planet." They made their way through the twisting passages, heading toward what they hoped was an exit. The cave system was larger than they'd expected, with multiple levels and branching corridors that seemed to go on forever. Some of the passages showed signs of ancient habitation, carved walls, worked stone, the remains of what might once have been living spaces. "This place is old," Marcus observed, running his hand along a section of carved wall. The symbols were worn almost smooth by time, but he could still make out geometric patterns that seemed almost familiar. Zara stopped to examine the carvings more closely. "Pre-contact civilization," she said. "Arcturus Prime wasn't always uninhabited. Something happened here, long ago." A distant sound made them both freeze. Energy weapons firing and alien voices raised in alarm. The Zarathi had found their missing team member. "Run," Zara said simply. They raced through the ancient corridors, Marcus limping as fast as his injured leg would allow. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. The Zarathi were tracking them now, following their scent or heat signature, or whatever other sensors their advanced technology provided. The passage they were following began to slope upward, and Marcus felt a whisper of wind against his face. Fresh air, which meant they were getting close to the surface. But the sounds behind them were getting closer too. They emerged from the cave system onto a windswept plateau high above the crash site. The storm had passed, leaving the landscape covered in pristine white snow under the light of Arcturus Prime's pale sun. In the distance, Marcus could see the smoke still rising from his ship's wreckage. "There," Zara pointed to a cluster of structures about a kilometer away. "Looks like some kind of research facility. Prefabricated buildings, probably abandoned, but might still have working communications equipment." They started across the plateau, but they'd only gone a few hundred meters when the first Zarathi emerged from the cave behind them. The alien. Soldier raised its weapon, and energy beams began sizzling through the air around them. Zara spun around, the captured rifle already in her hands. She returned fire with impossible accuracy, her shots finding their targets even while running backwards through knee-deep snow. 2 Zarathi went down, but more were emerging from the cave mouth. "I can't hit them all," she shouted over the sound of weapons fire. "There are too many." Marcus looked ahead at the research facility, then back at their pursuers. They weren't going to make it, not with his injured leg slowing them down. The Zarathi were faster, better equipped, and they had the advantage of numbers. That's when he saw the avalanche zone. The slope above the cave mouth was steep and covered with fresh snow from the recent storm. The kind of unstable accumulation that avalanche experts warned about. And the Zarathi, focused on their pursuit, were gathering directly beneath it. "Zara!" Marcus grabbed her arm, pointing up at the slope. "Can you hit that overhang? The one with all the snow?" She followed his gaze and understood immediately. The captured energy rifle whined as she adjusted its power settings to maximum. "Get ready to run," she said. The blast struck the snow overhang like the fist of an angry god. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the entire slope began to move, thousands of tons of snow and ice sliding down toward the cave mouth with gathering momentum. The Zarathi looked up just in time to see their doom approaching. Some tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. The avalanche swallowed them like a white tide, burying the cave entrance under tons of frozen debris. Marcus and Zara watched from a safe distance as the snow settled. Nothing moved in the aftermath. "That should buy us some time," Zara said, slinging the rifle back over her shoulder. "How much time?" Marcus asked. "Depends on how many other search teams they deployed, but it's something." She looked toward the research facility. "Let's see if we can find a way to call for help." Signals in the dark. The research facility was indeed abandoned, but recent enough that most of its systems were still functional. Solar collectors fed power to basic life support, and the communications array looked intact despite years of neglect. Marcus settled into a chair in the main lab, while Zara worked on establishing a connection to the broader galactic communication network. "What kind of research were they doing here?" Marcus asked, looking around at the equipment. Scientific instruments he didn't recognize filled the laboratory spaces, along with samples of local flora and fauna preserved in containment fields. "Xenoarchaeology. From the looks of it," Zara replied, her fingers dancing over the communication console with practiced efficiency. "They were studying the ruins we passed through in the cave system, probably trying to figure out what happened to the original inhabitants." Marcus picked up a data tablet from one of the workstations. The text was in standard Galactic, which he could read well enough after years of military service. The research logs told a disturbing story. The original inhabitants of Arcturus Prime hadn't died out naturally. They'd been harvested. "Zara, you need to see this," he said, handing her the tablet. She scanned the contents quickly, her expression growing darker with each line. Zarathi harvesting operations dating back over 1,000 years. This wasn't expansion or conquest. It was farming. Farming what? Marcus asked, though he was afraid he already knew the answer. Genetic material, neural patterns, life essence, whatever you want to call it. The Zarathi don't just conquer species, they consume them. Completely. Zara set the tablet aside with obvious disgust. My people always suspected, but this is the first direct evidence we've found. The communication console chimed softly, indicating an established connection. Zara immediately began transmitting on multiple frequencies, broadcasting distress signals and intelligence reports in rapid bursts. "Will anyone hear us?" Marcus asked. "Someone will. The question is whether they'll get here before the Zarathi figure out how to dig their way out of that avalanche." Zara paused in her transmissions. "There's something else. I'm detecting other signals in the area, recent ones." She adjusted the receivers, filtering out static and interference. Gradually, voices emerged from the noise. Human voices, speaking in clipped military jargon. "This is Strike Team Alpha requesting immediate evac from Landing Zone Charlie. Heavy Zarathi presence. Repeat, heavy Zarathi presence." "Alpha, this is Command. Evac is not possible at this time. Orbital assets are engaged with enemy fleet elements. You're on your own until we can establish air superiority." Marcus felt a surge of hope mixed with concern. "There are other survivors from the fleet engagement, but they're trapped too." Zara was already adjusting the transmitter. "Strike Team Alpha, this is Intelligence Asset Nightwind. Do you copy?" Static filled the channel for several seconds. Then, "Nightwind, this is Captain Rodriguez, Alpha Team Leader. We heard about you from Admiral Peterson. Thought you were dead. Reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated," Zara replied with a slight smile. "I have critical intelligence on Zarathi operations, and one survivor from the UES Defiance. What's your situation?" "We're holed up in a mining complex about 50 clicks northeast of your position. Got maybe 30 Marines and a few ship's crew who made it down in escape pods, but we're surrounded, and our supplies won't last much longer." Marcus leaned into the microphone. "Captain Rodriguez, this is Captain Kane, former commander of the Defiance. What's the tactical situation up there?" "Kane? Damn, sir. Good to hear your voice. Thought we lost you when your ship went down. As for the tactical situation, it's a mess. The Zarathi brought a whole battle group. Our fleet is scattered, and they're systematically hunting down our survivors on the surface." Zara frowned, studying the tactical displays she'd managed to activate. "Captain Rodriguez, I need you to transmit all available data on Zarathi force. Dispositions. I have access to intelligence resources that might help us find a weakness." "Copy that, Nightwind." "Transmitting now." Data began flowing across the screens as Rodriguez's team uploaded everything they'd observed about the enemy forces. Ship configurations, troop movements, communication patterns. Zara absorbed it all with the intensity of a predator studying prey. "There," she said suddenly, pointing to a pattern in the data. "The Zarathi command ship is maintaining position, directly above the primary landing zones. It's coordinating the ground search operations through a centralized neural network." Marcus looked at the display. "So if we could take out the command ship, the ground forces would lose their coordination." "Yes, but that's easier said than done. The command ship is heavily shielded and protected by a squadron of escorts." "What about from the inside?" Marcus asked. "Could we somehow get aboard?" Zara's eyes lit up with dangerous interest. "Actually, there might be a way. The Zarathi use harvesting ships to transport captured specimens. If we could make them think they'd captured us, You want to get intentionally captured by aliens who turn people into genetic soup? Marcus stared at her. That's insane. It's also our best chance of stopping them before they finish harvesting every human on this planet. Zara began pulling up schematics on the research facility's computers. The question is whether Captain Rodriguez and his team would be willing to help us pull it off. Marcus looked at the communication console, then back at Zara. Her plan was crazy, risky, and would probably get them all killed. It was also the kind of desperate gambit that might actually work. Rodriguez, he said into the microphone, how do you feel about attempting the impossible? The final gambit. The plan required precise timing and more than a little luck. Captain Rodriguez and his Marines would create a diversion at the mining complex, drawing the Zarati ground forces away from the research facility. Meanwhile, Marcus and Zara would stage their own capture, allowing themselves to be taken aboard the harvesting ship when it came to collect them. Remember, Zara said, as they prepared the facility for their fake last stand, once we're on board, we'll only have minutes before they begin the harvesting process. The moment we're in their medical bay, I'll break us out and we head for the command center. Marcus checked the weapons they'd salvaged from the facility's emergency lockers. Standard energy pistols. Nothing fancy, but they would have to do. And if this doesn't work, then at least we'll have tried. Zara's expression was grim but determined. Better than waiting here to be hunted down like animals. The first phase of the plan went perfectly. Rodriguez's Marines hit the mining complex with everything they had, explosions and weapons fire lighting up the northern horizon. The Zarathi response was immediate and predictable. Every available ground unit was redirected to deal with what appeared to be a major human stronghold. That left only a skeleton crew to investigate the research facility when Zara began broadcasting distress signals, and Marcus set off controlled explosions to simulate a desperate last stand. They made it look good. Scattered debris, scorch marks on the walls, the appearance of a facility under siege. When the Zarathi arrived, they found 2 humans apparently trapped in the main laboratory, surrounded by the aftermath of what looked like a fierce firefight. Marcus played his part perfectly, supporting Zara as if she were wounded, both of them showing the kind of exhaustion that comes from a hopeless fight. The aliens were cautious, but confident. They'd done this thousands of times before on hundreds of worlds. 2 more specimens for the harvesting chambers, genetic material to be analyzed and absorbed into the collective knowledge of their species. The harvesting ship was exactly as terrifying as Marcus had imagined. Organic curves mixed with mechanical precision, its corridors pulsing with a rhythm that suggested something alive and hungry. They were placed in holding cells that were more like digestive chambers, walls that secreted a paralytic substance, designed to keep captives docile during transport. Now would be good, Marcus whispered, as he felt the chemical agents beginning to affect his nervous system. Zara's response was to explode into motion. The paralytic agents that would have incapacitated a human had no effect on her sanguinian physiology. She tore through the holding cell's organic walls like tissue paper, then broke Marcus free before the chemicals could fully take hold. Alarms began wailing throughout the ship as they fought their way toward the command center. Zarathi crew members rushed to stop them. But Zara moved like a force of nature, her enhanced speed and strength turning her into a whirlwind of destruction. Marcus followed in her wake, covering their retreat with precise shots from his energy pistol. The command center was the heart of the ship, a living chamber where dozens of Zarathi technicians interfaced directly with the vessel's neural networks. Banks of organic computers processed information from across the fleet, coordinating the systematic harvesting of every human life on Arcturus Prime. There, Zara pointed to the central command node, a pulsing mass of biomechanical components. That seemed to be the ship's brain. If we can overload that system, it should cascade through the entire network. Marcus began setting charges from their limited supply of explosives, while Zara worked at one of the interface terminals, her fingers flying over controls designed for alien hands. Around them, Zarathi technicians began to realize what was happening, their harmonic voices rising in alarm. "Whatever you're doing, do it faster," Marcus said, shooting down a warrior that had gotten too close. "Almost there," Zara replied. "I just need to—" "There!" The ship's entire neural network convulsed as Zara introduced a cascading virus into its core systems. The command node began to pulse erratically, its bioluminescence flickering like a dying star. Throughout the ship, systems began failing as the infection spread, but their victory was short-lived. The ship's captain, a massive Zarathi with cybernetic enhancements covering half its exoskeleton, burst into the command center with a squad of elite warriors. Energy weapons charged and ready, they had Marcus and Zara trapped. "Surrender!" The captain commanded in surprisingly clear Standard Galactic. "Your interference ends now." Marcus looked at Zara, then at the charges he'd placed around the command center. Still not armed, but close enough to the central node that a single detonation might be enough to complete their sabotage. "You know what?" he said, raising his hands as if in surrender. "I think we've interfered enough." He triggered the charges. The explosion tore through the command center like a cleansing fire, destroying the central node and sending cascading failures throughout the ship's neural network. The captain and its warriors were caught in the blast, their forms silhouetted against the brilliant destruction of their vessel's brain. Marcus felt Zara grab him as the ship began to tear itself apart, organic systems failing as the neural cascade spread beyond any hope of control. She carried him through corridors that were convulsing like the intestines of a dying beast, toward what she hoped was an escape pod bay. They made it out just as the harvesting ship began its final death spiral, from the safety of their stolen escape pod. They watched as the massive vessel plowed into Arcturus Prime's surface like a falling star, its destruction visible from orbit. "The command network is down," Zara reported, monitoring communications channels. "The ground forces are scattered, confused. Rodriguez and his Marines are already reporting Zarathi units retreating." Marcus smiled despite the pain from his various injuries. "Think it worked?" Before Zara could answer, new contacts appeared on their sensors. Human ships dropping out of hyperspace in force. The cavalry had finally arrived, drawn by the distress signals and the spectacular failure of the Zarathi command structure. "UES Defiance survivors, this is Admiral Chen aboard the UES Retribution. Prepare for immediate recovery." As their pod was drawn into the battleship's landing bay, Marcus looked over at Zara. "So what happens now? Do you go back to your people?" Zara considered the question. "Actually, I think I'd like to stick around for a while. Your species has a talent for turning impossible situations into victories. My people could learn from that." Marcus laughed, the sound echoing in the small pod. "Welcome to humanity. We specialize in the impossible." Outside, the stars waited, full of challenges, yet to come. But for the first time in days, Marcus felt like they might just be ready to face them.